Divine Grace of Aya Charanam Bhaktivedanta Goswami Srila Prabhupada Jai. Iskcon Founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Jai. Anandakoti Vaishnava Vrinda Jai. Srila Haridas Thakur Ram Se Gaho Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Gadadhar Shivasati Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Jai. Shri Radha Krishna Giri Govardhan ki jai, Vrindavan ki jai, Jairam ki jai, Swami ki jai, Yamuna Mai ki jai, Shrimati Vilasade ki jai, Bhakta Vrinda ki jai, Gaur Pramananda. All glorious these devotees, all glorious these devotees. All glorious to Shri Guru and Gauranga, Shri Prabhupada. Udale, Shrimati Bhakti, Gauravani Pachari, Nivishesha Shrivati, Paschatya Deja Tarani, Sarganatsunanda Shah, Gananjana Shlakya Chakshur, that's my Shikaveda Maha. So I'm very happy to be here with all of you. And I understand yesterday you celebrated the Panihati Festival, right? So, okay. So, anyway, two things. I thought we could leave a lot of time open for questions. But first I wanted to address something about the Panihati Festival you may not have heard before. I don't know how much of the story you told yesterday. Who told the story yesterday? And the story was, did you tell about Raghunath Das Goswami's renunciation, leaving home and everything like that? Yes. So you got the whole story there. Yeah. So one of the things I wanted to address, because devotees oftentimes have a misunderstanding that devotional service means to leave your family. It's a really common misunderstanding. So in my dealings with a lot of people from India especially, their parents are very upset when they come to Krishna consciousness because they think their son or daughter is no longer going to love them, no longer going to say, isn't it true? This is a major fear that parents of devotees from India have. And they're thinking, oh, they're going to leave their wife, just like Raghunath Das Goswami. You heard the story yesterday. Raghunath Das Goswami had so much money and wealth, it was like Indra. And his wife was like an Apsara from the heavenly planets, isn't it? You probably heard that yesterday. And he just gave it all up, like, oh my God, I won't even use the example. Like someone leaves the latrine. And you hear other stories, like Bart Maharaj, same thing. You know Bart Maharaj, he just left everything. Of course, later on, he made a mistake, he became a deer, but that's another issue. And so people have this misunderstanding that there's no love in the Krishna consciousness movement, and that those who become devotees will neglect their families, or be unloving, neglect their children, and it'll create a disaster in society. Anyone's heard that misunderstanding before? I've seen it, especially amongst our Indian congregation. The big fear of that. That I was just visiting people's homes about 2 days ago, and people were expressing that, you know. There was a husband very interested in Krishna consciousness, and the wife was saying, you know, what's going to happen with my husband? And of course I said, your husband's going to renounce you and leave you all alone. It's up to you. Krishna will protect you. So generally, and then you have so many of these devotees in our Vaishnava history who are renunciates. You know, 6 Goswamis of Vrindavan, right? Interesting. And so naturally people are a little worried. So what's the real story? Well, the real story is Raghunath Das Goswami was an Nityasiddha devotee. as were the other Goswamis of Vrindavan. And they had a specific mission to fulfill for Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And because of that specific mission, this is all a pastime. Like that. However, in our lives, we cannot blame our detachment on a pastime. Our detachment that we may exhibit in this material world, unless you're very, very advanced devotee on the level of Raghunath Das Goswami, our detachment is coming more from the mode of passion. What is the mode of passion? According to Krishna in the Gita, mode of passion detachment means you give up something because it's too much trouble. And you read the Gita about this? Renunciation of the modes of nature, goodness, passion, ignorance. It's all there in the Bhagavad Gita. So that's generally, and sometimes you see people either taking sannyas, not me, I'm very happy to take sannyas, but I think it's important to address, or just neglecting their family in some way or other, and that because in family is too much trouble. It is trouble. One gets married, takes care of the family. It's a lot of work. Yeah. Taking care of children, sending them to the university or sending them to school, even changing their diaper, just like I was on a plane here, coming to Orlando. And I had the great fortune of having a mother with a baby sitting next to me. And I got the mercy of the baby's lotus feet on me. It's very kind to this baby. He was kicking me and everything. And I was thinking, and then sometimes, of course I can't do a good imitation. It sounds more like a duck. Anyway, so it was, I could see how big a struggle is. And then the husband was sitting in the row in front, so they kept passing the kids over everyone's. So it's a lot of trouble. It's a lot of trouble taking care of people. So, but Krishna consciousness is different than renunciation because something's a lot of trouble. Krishna consciousness means to have more devotion to or for your family. More devotion for your friends. Why is that? It's a very interesting phenomenon because when you chant, when you perform the activities of Krishna consciousness, you become less selfish. Okay, thank you. Generally, in our relationships, we are thinking about what someone can do for us, right? Like, I know in Indian culture, a man gets married because he wants someone to cook for him, iron his clothes. And, sometimes in the traditional Indian culture, a woman is just supposed to stay in the kitchen all the time and roll chapatis. Isn't it? Fiji's like that to a certain extent. The man comes back and says, I want my rotis. He said rotis is a name for chapatis. And so, and so that attitude that the wife is just meant for my satisfaction, or the husband is just meant to make money and support me. That's your business, buddy. Just like in the story in the Valmiki Ramayana. Some of you may be familiar with the Valmiki Ramayana. Then you have this dacoit named Ratnagara. And dacoit means he was a thief, criminal, and everything like that. He was robbing people. So Ratnagara, he would stop people on the path and try to rob them and kill them sometimes too. So one time he stopped these 7 sages from the Saptarishis. And he said, give me your money. Of course, they didn't have much money. They were just sages, just in gumptions. How much money could they have? So he stopped them, and they said to him, don't you understand what you're doing will accrue a lot of bad karma? And he said, I know that. He was a philosophical dacoit. Actually, he was born in a Brahmin family, so he knew all this stuff philosophically. He said, but I love my family. And the rishis, the sages, said to him, well, you love your family. Does your family love you? And he said, of course. And they said, here's a test. Go back to them. see if your wife and kids are willing to accept part of your karma. So he goes back home, and he says, my dear Devi, that's how wives are dressed, Devi. And husbands are dressed Pati Dev, in case you didn't know. So he said, are you willing to accept part of the karma? I mean, you're getting a lot of the benefit. And she said, hell no. He said, actually, your business is to buy me sorries. You keep me fed. And then he goes to his son. And let's put it in a modern context. I'm going to change a few details. He says to his son, are you willing to take some karma, my dear son, Putra? And he said, no, Dad. Your business is to buy me some iPhones. So, and he realizes, his daughter says something similar, I don't know what she says. And he realizes, oh my God, there's no love here. And so he goes back to the Sapta Rishis, and he says, what should I do? And they say, chant Ram. And he said, I can't do that, I'm too bad. And so they give him this other mantra. Some of you may know the story. Mara, 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 and turns to Ram. And he becomes a great devotee. So, the reason I'm telling that story is that in this material world, our relationships are generally tinged, at least, with some sort of selfishness. And of course, the closest thing in the material world to an unselfish relationship is the relationship a mother has with her children. That's the closest thing. So if we want to have real loving relationships means unselfish relationships. I want to do the best thing for you materially and spiritually. And in order to be selfless, one has to have a pure heart, isn't it? And so the only way I know of getting a pure heart is what? Anyone know? Anyone guess? Chanting, following Bhakti Yoga. There's no other way. Like Prabhupada said, in Kali Yuga, our hearts are so impure. If we try to wash them any other way, it's like taking coal and trying to wash a piece of coal. The coal never gets clean, and your hands get dirty at the same time. There's no other process. I mean, you could do yoga postures for 10,000 years or whatever. But the only process, Cheto Dharmana, Marshall, Baba Maharaj, Nirvapana, isn't it? Shreya Kairapi, Chandra Kali, Vidyavadi, Ananda Buddhi Vardhana, Pradipannam, Pranamatasvana, Sarvana Snapana, Pranamajayate, Shri Krishna, Sankirtana. That's of course Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's first version of Shikshashta. So what I find is that if someone is a real devotee, the relationship, the loving relationship with the family becomes much more pure and much less selfish. And that's really been my experience. I mean, even my experience with my mother, because I was sannyasi, but even sannyasis have mothers in the shop too. That before I joined Krishna consciousness, I would say that I was more cold towards my mother than before. And actually, I just joined the movement, and she was upset that I joined her. But anyway, so, but after I felt much more compassion. I have to help her, I have to save her, I have to give her Krishna consciousness. So by being Krishna conscious, not only do you care more in an unselfish way for someone, but you know what to do for them. If you don't know what to do or how to help people, ultimately, then you may be dragging them down. Like if you, I'll give you another example. When I was young, one time I was in New York and taking a subway or something like that, and but you can't use the word bum anymore, street person. You gotta do politically correct language. So some street person approached me, hey, could you give me, whatever it was, a quarter. A quarter in those days meant, say things, $3 or $4 nowadays. So, and I gave it to him, and the police said to me, shouldn't you give it to him because he's just gonna spend it on liquor. And so, I was thinking that if you give someone something, or if you help someone and you don't know what's good for them, you can actually be hurting them. Like Prabhupada gave the example of a little boy who had a brother who had some liver disease. And this little boy thought he was going to be kind to his brother by giving his brother some pakoras. And if anyone knows that, if you take fried food when you have liver disease, it makes the disease worse. So sometimes that's charity of the mode of ignorance, actually. To give someone or help someone in such a way that it's going to hurt them. So in that light, a devotee not only becomes selfless, but he knows what to do to help people both materially and spiritually. And if we want to have really loving relationships and loving families and take responsibility for the family, then we have to become Krishna conscious. And then one is very devoted to one's family. And then getting back to the point about Lord Chaitanya's followers, the majority of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's followers are grahastas, not sannyasis. You have people like Ramananda Roy, Sikhi Mahiti, other many close associates of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And even Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, when people wanted to follow him, he was touring South India, and they wanted to just take sannyas, leave their families. He said, don't talk like that anymore. Just stanis tatab, shruti katab, tan bhanman over here. That means just stay where you are, and just add the chanting of Hare Krishna and Yari de Gatari Krishna Pradesh, Amari Gari Guru Hori Tore Desh. Then just you become a guru and bring people to Krishna consciousness. And we find, just a final note before I take questions. So I thought it was interesting. I was thinking about this during the Panihanti festival. Isn't it? I mean, it's really interesting point. So anyway, so maybe we'll leave that as the final point. That more loving. Oh yeah, the final point I wanted to make was that we find Prabhupada's recipe for spreading the movement in the Upadeshamrita. Dadati Prachapurnati Guyam Akyati Prichati Punke Chaga. For those of you who don't know that first, it means the movement spreads, which Prabhupada remarked on, that by loving exchanges. And loving exchanges means there's true care and love between Vaishnavas, whether they're married to each other, whether they're friends, or whether you meet someone on the street. You really care. And I remember one of my godbrothers, who's expert in book distribution, maybe you've heard his name, Vaishesha Guru. He so much cares for people, people sense it so much, that when he goes out in the street and even waves his hand to someone, they stop from the opposite side of the street and then run over to see him. It's amazing. And why did I join the Krishna consciousness movement? Because I met Prabhupada. And why did that impress me? Because I understood Prabhupada care. Not because of what I could do for him, but just because he cared. That's unmotivated. Unmotivated devotional service is in relationship not only with Krishna and Guru, but with all living entities. And so that's an important lesson, lest we get confused by the story of Raghunath Das Goswami and all these stories of renunciation, Sanatan Goswami leaving home, Rupa Goswami leaving home. I mean, for very few people, like those sannyas, for very few people like myself, sannyas may be appropriate. But in general, and then even as sannyasi, I like devotees. You know, it's not that I'm just like some fire and brimstone. That's a Christian expression. Spitting sannyasi. I remember in the early days, you had a lot of these sannyasis that took sannyas and they would just like go in and give an anti-grahasta class at the temple. And the ladies would run out crying. And some of those sannyasis right now are married. Because attraction and repulsion are two sides of the same coin, are different sides of the same coin. So you have two sides of the same coin. So they're two sides of the same coin. In other words, if someone's repulsed by something, that means they're thinking of it all the time. If someone's attracted by something, they're thinking of it all the time. So a devotee just has to be kind to everybody and selfless. And that's the symptom of advancement. How do you become selfless? By chanting Hare Krishna, following the rule, and don't offend devotees. Because if you offend devotees, you get covered up and your selfishness again comes out, and you won't be able to maintain Krishna consciousness. Be kind to all living entities, especially devotees, Jiva Joy, Vaishnava Seva, Namaruchi, the 3 lessons that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has given us. Okay, with that brief, or not so brief introduction, we can take questions. Anything you want to know about, my meeting Prabhupada, or the philosophy of Krishna consciousness, or anything like that. And as I mentioned before, it was Prabhupada's compassion that had me join the movement. But when I was preached to too heavy by the devotees, it took 2 more years till I joined the movement. I first met the devotees in 1969, that's before any of you were born. And then the devotees preached really heavy to me. They basically told me I was going to hell unless I joined. And I said, I got to stay away from these people. Finally, I met Prabhupada in 1971, actually here in Florida, in Gainesville, Florida. And just Prabhupada's compassion and love. Just, that was it. That was it. Bye-bye, material world. Okay, some questions? Yes.
You mentioned an important point, detachment in the mode of passion.
Yeah.
So how do we know, this is not a detachment in the mode of passion? For example, and we discussed briefly at home, like we have some Ekadashis come in sometimes, and we see in the calendar being mentioned there from previous devotees that Nirjala Ekadashi, fast, without water, you attain something, and we say, yes, we'll do it. We wake up all night. Just man, I'm to ask you,
Well,
how is the borderline, or how to understand that?
God. You want me to talk about Nirjala Ekadashi? The point is, Prabhupada's move, is to maximize our Krishna consciousness. Maximization of Krishna consciousness and preaching Krishna consciousness was always Prabhupada's standard. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur one time had one of his disciples eat grains on Ekadasi so he could go out and preach. So, the Prabhupada said, a preacher is the essence, purity is the force, books are the basis, isn't it? Utility is the principle. So, I think whatever is best for our Krishna consciousness should be done. And I hesitate to comment on that specific question, but I see it sometimes the devotees who stay awake all night long, do something on Ekadasi, and then the next day they're sleeping. So does it maximize or not? I'm not one to criticize anyone for doing that. But Prabhupada himself, on every Ekadasi, including Bhima Nirjala Ekadasi, he had special Ekadasi feasts. We look forward to Ekadasi when Prabhupada was on the planet. I remember Prabhupada had, on Ekadasi we would have all sorts of things. Goranga potatoes, anyone here know what Goranga potatoes is? Jars. You know what jars? Carrot halva, chutneys, and I think there were rotis made of something. Anyway, whatever it was made of, wasn't a grain. And we ate. Prabhupada had us eat 3 times a day. I joined the movement. There was breakfast, there was opulent lunch every day, including Ekadasi, and dinner. And it was ecstatic. We look forward to eating. I mean, Krishna consciousness, kitchen religion, and everything was cooked in ghee. And Prabhupada said, of course I'm not trying to just preach you at ghee. Prabhupada said if someone takes ghee, they'll never forget the taste. Something cooked in ghee. I mean, right now I don't take anything cooked. That's another issue. But I'm also, I'm a vegan, for the principles of the Hamsa. But that's another issue. But anyway, so Prabhupada really wanted to bring people to Krishna consciousness, and prasadam distribution was an important part of his strategy. And, Prabhupada himself, his austerity was waking up early, translating his books, pushing his devotees, managing the movement. I mean, that's much more austere. I mean, for those of you who engage in management, which I do, you know, GBC, Government by Commission, it's very austere. I mean, I have to deal with so many issues that come up every day, even today. You know, I'm not going to tell you about the issue I dealt with today, but it's the heavy issue people call me about. You know, Roger B. Hari, you know, a conflict management person called me about this. And it's an austerity, but we do it to please Krishna. So what I think is, I just want to do things that please Krishna. I don't know if Krishna's actually pleased if I eat very little. You know, I know being with Prabhupada, that if you came to Prabhupada and said, Prabhupada, I'm eating very little, Prabhupada would say, do something practical. You know, even I remember that there were devotees who were following Chaturmasya and growing beards. Not the ladies, just the men. So they're growing beards, and Prabhupada said, this is Chaturmas. You know, because they had really long hair, they didn't cut their nails. I mean, yeah, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur did this, but he was just preparing to preach. And it's a completely different scenario. So Prabhupada's our acharya, and I just try to do what Prabhupada did and have the same priorities that Srila Prabhupada had. And so, you know, if one can stay awake all night and serve the next day, all glories to you. All glories. I mean, certainly Ekadasi is meant to chant more. That's true. Ekadasi is meant to hear more. Ekadasi is meant to reduce your bodily necessities on that particular day. Well, be practical about it, because that's the only thing. You know, Prabhupada said chant more, but then Prabhupada said, was asked about the preachers. He says, no, the preachers are exempt. So if we're bringing people to Krishna consciousness, then that's it's an austerity. To deal with people, have people not like you, you know, like one book distribution, people just say, get out of here, get a job. And that's more of an austerity than fasting, as far as I'm concerned. So, anyway, that was Prabhupada's priority. So, yeah, but it's fine to have kirtans all night long. I'm not against the chanting of the holy name. I think that's beautiful. You know, but maximize your Krishna consciousness. You know, value added. That's the way I always think of things. How can I add value to Prabhupada's movement? You know, what's the way I can maximize my value to Prabhupada's movement? And, you know, frankly, as I get older, you know, I understand the sands are running out on the hourglass. You know, sands, hourglass. Everyone knows that example. That means time factor. You know, when you're young, you don't think about the time factor. You think that sands would never run out. But, you know, you look at, you know, I'm 76, so I look at this scenario. Oh my God, I just have a limited amount of, we all have a limited amount of time. And you don't know. Like Prabhupada said, in Gainesville, Florida, Prabhupada said to one young person, how do you know that you're not older than me? And the young person didn't understand what Prabhupada was saying. And Prabhupada said, old age means how close you are to death. How do you know you're not closer to death than me? So, yeah, for all of us, the sand is running out, and we got limited time just to maximize our service for Krishna every day. You know, that's why I'm just pushing myself in different ways. Not so much that it'll deter my health. I think that's really important too. Because otherwise, that's another factor mentioned in the Nectar of Instruction. Prayasas, which means over-endeavor. You know, if you over-endeavor, you'll ultimately collapse and minimize. So, in the 6th chapter of the Gita, Krishna says the yogi is Vichara Viharsh. He's balanced in his eating and sleeping, and which is what I try to do to maximize the health. So I eat for my health, as devotees by Prayam Shraddhanjali will tell you that I eat for my health. Whatever is, I treat my body like the car. You know, you put in the type of petrol that's good for it. Not too high grade, not too low grade. You know, it's a good example. So, other questions or comments? Yes. discussion.
Hare Krishna Maharaj.
Yeah.
I was wondering, is there a way to share Krishna with someone that wants nothing to do with Krishna? Like they have very negative feelings associated towards Krishna.
Yeah, give him a cookie. You know, actually, we're supposed to be Majjhima Adhikaris. I don't know if you know the difference between a Kanishta, Majjhima, and Uttama Adhikari. Okay, this is an important point. Kanishta Adhikari basically only sees Krishna on the altar in the temple. Doesn't see Krishna in everyone's heart. That's an almost devotee. Almost devotee. Vaishnava Praya is the technical word for it. And then the second stage is Majjhima Adhikari. Majjhima Adhikari sees Krishna in everyone's heart, sees Krishna on the altar, sees Krishna in everyone's, all the animals' hearts and everything. But a Majjhima Adhikari is meant to interact with 4 different types of entities. First one is, of course, the worships Krishna. That's the first one. That's pretty good. Secondly, he makes friends with the devotees. He preaches to the innocent. That's the next one. And then he avoids those who are not interested. And one of course, Uttama Adhikari, topmost devotee, he can preach to anyone. It doesn't matter, like Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, of course he's God. He went and preached to the Mayavadis in Benares, Rakasnanda Saraswati and others. And he was able to do that, but we don't have the prerogative, the ability to do that, so we have to distinguish. And save your time. I mean, I remember when I used to do a lot of book distribution, we'd have people who were inimical. Actually, there were people from a different religion who were telling me that I was going to hell. And, there's a tendency to spend time with them because they, first of all, put on an air of being interested. Anyone's experienced that before? They go up to you and say, hey, tell me all about it. Wow, it's really interesting. And you know what's coming. Yeah, something like that. So therefore, I developed a habit of not spending time with them. Because as soon as they say that, have you ever accepted Jesus in your heart? What do I say? Yes. And he told me to join the Hare Krishna movement. Then they go, okay, no. So it ends all the arguments. And it's a nice thing to do. You're not offending anyone. So basically, we don't waste time. We have so little time, so we spend it on those who are favorable. That's all. Why waste time with someone who's not going to accept? Give them some prasadam, pray for them. But we're not so advanced, that we can just save people who are inimical. Yeah. Another question. Pass the mic.
So, Hare Krishna. These inimical people then, if they're in our families.
Yeah. That's a good question. Then we don't speak about Krishna with them. We act normally. That was, in the beginning, that was sort of like the experience I had with some of my family members. I first went and preached to them. Wow, that was a mistake. Big mistake. You're eating meat. You're going to become an animal in your next life. A new devotee. That's the new devotee disease. So, after a while, I thought, I want to keep a good relationship with these people. And so I said to these family members, let's not talk about Krishna. I just want to have a good relationship with you. So when I went home, I would just talk about, what they were interested in more or less was politics. And that was before Donald Trump, so don't worry. That's when, and I never say anything, get in trouble. Get kicked out of the country, put in jail, or something. Even though I'm born in America. So then the relationship became, and then they thought, wow, he's still normal. Wow. And then after a while, they became very favorable. My father gave some major donations to the movement. And my mother, it's an interesting story how Krishna saved my mother. She left her body when she was about 92, 93. And she started to forget all of her material things because that's the benefit of having dementia. You become detached. And so one of the last times I called her on the phone and I said, she said, son, I have something to tell you. And I said, Mom, what is it? And she said, I'm a Hare Krishna. And the interesting thing is I said to her, Mom, I'm a Hare Krishna too. And she said, really? I didn't know that. That's nice. And so basically, and right before she left Georgia, she became more and more attached to Krishna. And interesting story, I was on the other side of the world in Fiji, and I got a call from my brother that your mother's getting ready to leave her body. I had no time to go, just fly and see her. So, of course, I called her on the phone and everything like that. And then I had one of the devotees from North Carolina, somebody who didn't know her, Tulsi. I sent her a plane ticket, we do that through the internet, and had her fly to New York. Immediately one of my disciples picked her up in Philly, drove her to New York. I took her, picked her up in New York, and drove her to my mother's apartment in Manhattan. Went up to where my mother was with the nurse. She had a full-time nurse, and told the nurse, you look too tired, go rest. And she lay down next to my mother, started chanting, gave her Ganga Jal, conscious water, and a Tulsi leaf, started chanting to her, very, very nicely. And within 20 minutes or something like that, my mother leaves her body. Amazing, amazing, because I was not pushing Krishna consciousness, and because I was a devotee, and because I was praying for her. I mean, it's really true that if you're a devotee, so many generations of your family get benefited. And it was completely like that with my family. It's just, very, very positive experience. Even my father, before he left his body, he said he attributed all of his success to my being a devotee. Of course, neither one left me money directly. Because they were afraid I was going to give it all to the Hare Krishna movement. Which is all right, because Krishna's taking care of me. And so it's interesting. So, you have another question about that?
I guess a quick one. So you say you don't talk about Krishna, so naturally all you're going to talk about is material things.
Yeah.
And it's one of the things we're told to avoid being around. Does it hurt us?
No, because it's a
our family's
necessary.
different.
Prabhupada would sometimes engage in small talk with people too. I mean, not simple things. Not that you talk about, hey, did you see that girl there, or something like that. Obviously, you don't eat meat. But, there's no harm talking about, if there's some talk about sports, what do you think about this team or that team, whatever. You gotta make people comfortable, because if you act too weird, according to their estimation, and then, they're begin to think, this guy's brainwashed. It's just not. And, in the beginning, I was acting weird. And, I found out later after my mother left her body, in the beginning she was thinking of hiring a deprogrammer. This person named Ted Patrick, you may have heard his name from the book. And so, but she gave that up because she saw I was normal and happy. So it's important to be normal with people. It's just too weird, if you look at a lot of things we do from someone who's not Krishna conscious perspective, especially in the Western world, it appears to be a little weird. So you have to really present Krishna like in like a plow, in like a pin, out like a plow, as Prabhupada said. You have to present things in such a way that they're comfortable. And they inquire. I actually find they inquire for me. When I'm, actually, you know, when I go out and meet people, because I have a lot of, I don't do business, but, you know, I do things like arranging construction for the temple and other things like that. I just act normal, and after a while they start to ask me questions. You know, what's Krishna consciousness? Tell me about it. And then they're really open to hear about Krishna consciousness when I tell them about it. So it's part of strategy of sharing Krishna consciousness. You know, just don't be in their face too much. Good question, yeah.
Hare Krishna, Gurudev. So I guess something, at least like compassion in terms of like, I guess like in devotee standards versus like compassion in, I guess in more like Western sense, like modern Western sense, they're kind of different in a way. And so I guess they can be presented differently. So I guess like sometimes, for example, like in, like, we know, like, if somebody's, like, chanting Hare Krishna and, like, reading Srila Prabhupada's books, that all of these things, this is compassion, because it's, like,
Yeah.
more helping the self. But oftentimes, like, I guess, in other terms of compassion, it's more, like, external. And so that transition, like, I guess, like, when talking to people who aren't necessarily devotees and understand that stuff, it can come off as, like, being dismissive.
Yeah,
or
cold-hearted.
Yeah. So, like, I guess, how do you bridge the gap?
Well, let's tell the story about Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. He and his disciples were in a place and there were a lot of beggars, and the beggars were asking for money, obviously. And he said to them, you know, you're just going to simply become cold-hearted unless you try to help them. I mean, help them in such a way they're not going to, like, buy liquor or something like that with it. So, I think it's important to feel all types of compassion for people. You know, if you see people suffering in the hospital or something like that. I mean, for example, you know, I fly a lot. And I sometimes just like volunteer to help someone take their bag out from the bin. So, because, you know, I see an old lady, there's a bag up there in the bin, and I just feel sorry, I want to help her. And she may or may not know I'm a devotee. I mean, I travel generally in Western clothes. Of course, there's a seeker that gives it away. All things, and a pea bag that I always have with me. But at the same time, you know, I just feel want to help people, and I think, you know, I probably was like that too. You know, you can help someone, and actually, here's another story. Is it raining outside now?
I think it just started raining. Yeah.
How many shoes gonna get wet now?
No, it's dry.
Okay. So, once upon a time, the devotees were preparing for Rath Yatra. You may know this story. This is in Australia. And they had this very nice canopy for the cart. And, you know, they stitched, you know, nice, really strong canopy. And so, next to where they're preparing the Rath Yatra, the canopy and everything like that, there was a fire in the building. And people were trapped, you know, 2 or 3 stories up. And the devotees just had an idea, we'll just hold the canopy up. And they said to the lady or man or whatever it was, jump. And 1 or 2 people jumped and they saved them. And Prabhupada was really happy with that. And it was great publicity too. You know, the Hare Krishnas used their sacred cloth to save someone. So, you know, Prabhupada, you know, even when he was walking on his morning walks, just don't want my shoes to get wet, you know what I'm saying? When he was on his morning walk, he would say, you know, he would say Hare Krishna, but generally to other people he would say, good day. Or good morning, good day. Yeah, so Prabhupada was a well-wisher on all sorts of different levels. It would be really, just a misunderstanding of Prabhupada, a misunderstanding of how we should feel. To think that, the only thing we should do is help people, help people in that way. Just chant Hare Krishna, oh, you're suffering, chant Hare Krishna. We have to have some compassion. Even the devotees in the hospital, they say, oh, I have kidney stones, or something like that. I remember I had kidney stones. If someone came up to me and said, chant Hare Krishna, you're not the body. I mean, I'm not a fighter, but, I would have had the idea of, at least tell them to get the hell out of there. So in certain circumstances, you want someone with some compassion, even devotees. You have to be practical. It's not just like you preach, you're not the body. Just recently, one of my friends was diagnosed with cancer, and very nice devotee in North Carolina. And it's not that I just said, you have to realize you're not the body. I said, it's very difficult. I want to, tell me when you go to the hospital. I want to talk to you, tomorrow's his MRI. And so, we need that. Everyone has material and physical needs of this world, and everyone has spiritual needs. And so both things are important. And devotees concerned on all levels for others. Like Prabhupada. Prabhupada, there was a bug at the inside, and Prabhupada said, this bug looks hungry, put him outside. So my shoes aren't getting wet.
They're in a plastic bag.
Oh, they're inside. Plastic bag. Okay, so, see, I'm more concerned about my shoes. You have to be practical. What's the use of having wet shoes? Isn't it? You have to think. In other words, you have to function on all different levels. You can't just be like so high up there that you become like AI Krishna consciousness. Not the body, spirit, soul. So, any other questions? Yes. Huh?
How do you focus on the quality of your preaching and not so much quantity of preaching? I guess books would be an example. You want to kind of you want to make sure you're giving quality preaching, but it's kind of hard sometimes.
That's an interesting question. Generally, I like to find out about a person before I talk to them. Then I'll talk about books in a second. I usually ask a person questions just to find out where they're at, what their interests are. And then I know how to present Krishna consciousness. It's more of a quality thing. Because otherwise I'm just spouting off a lot of the Gita verses at them, which it's not really quality, and it may be quantity. But anyway, so as far as book distribution, I know there's so much stress on numbers. Sometimes there's stress on numbers. You have to distribute a certain amount of books like that. But we shouldn't do that at the expense of quality. I know that's happened in the past, where devotees were just concerned with numbers of books, and they didn't care how people felt, whether people were happy giving the donation or whether, they were just like coerced into giving the donation. So I think our first business is people. That's what I try to concentrate on. Like we were just talking earlier, my mission statement is more devotees, happier devotees. That means more Krishna conscious devotees. And whatever strategy accomplishes that, and how to enact that strategy. So I think quality is very important, but we don't want to go at quantity too. We don't want to spend all of our time talking to one person. So I think it's a balance. it's a balance. But without quality, what's the use of quantity? I mean, I remember in the old days, sometimes devotees would distribute so many books in the airport, and the books would be found by the janitors in the garbage. And so with the janitors, they were very intelligent. They took all the books and sold them back to the devotees at half price. So the same book got distributed so many times. But that's not really what, I think what Prabhupada wanted. Prabhupada wanted at least the person to take the book home. I mean, because someone gets benefit by putting it on their shelf in a nice place. At least Prabhupada wanted that, but otherwise, I don't know how much value it has just to have them throw the book in the garbage. They have to at least keep it in their home, even if they don't read it. That's fine. So yes, it requires intelligence. Good question. So other questions? Wow, we have some good questions here today.
Krishna Maharaj. So when Mataji asked a question about compassion, and you said that you grabbed the luggage for that person, the first thing came to mind was Prabhupada said, we become a gentleman.
Yeah.
So we should all become, have that compassion for every day, be very support morally. It's not like just about chanting, and just, that was very nice. And then also I had a question about, you said when you go home, you would not talk about Krishna, but would you ever take like prasadam to distribute to them? Would they? So
It would have to be something they could relate to.
Right, like a cookie or something.
Yeah,
like
some
custom.
Western type of prasadam.
So do you think that had an effect on them? Like
Yeah.
as your mom had that opportunity to remember, at least say, I'm a Hare Krishna. So
Well, my mother knew I was a Hare because it wasn't a secret.
No, but like at the time of her passing, she accepted like, oh, I'm a Hare Krishna.
Oh, did the prasadam have some effect?
Yeah.
I mean, obviously prasadam has effect. I'll tell you this funny story about my grandmother. I was visiting her right before she passed away in the old people's home. Of course, the interesting, just a side story about this, is that showing how people never lose their romantic desire. She was like 95 years old. She pointed out to a man at another table. She said, do you think he's the right man for me? Because my grandfather had passed away, a number of years before. And I was thinking, oh my God, how is this possible? I said, oh my God. I mean, so that was proof of what Prabhupada said, the lesson in this way. So, but what happened is that, okay, we were sitting there, and I was thinking, I got to give her some Radha water before she leaves her body. And she loved me. She came to my lectures, actually, in the temple. She was crying after her husband passed away. But she wasn't really that Krishna conscious. In fact, her husband, my grandfather, he asked when he was getting ready to pass away, all these passing away stories, he asked me, what happens after death? And she told him, don't ask that question to him. She said that to him. And for the first time in his life, he said to her, shut up. He never talked back to his wife the whole life. Because he knew she's real pushy. And anyway, so she's getting ready to leave her body. And so, how am I going to give her Radha water? I definitely want, I'm just fanatic like that. So, I get her to turn around, and I have this little eyedropper full of Radha water, and I put it in her coffee. And so she drinks the coffee, and I feel ecstatic. Also, when my mother passed away, there was no really sorrow. I was ecstatic because she had achieved Krishna's mercy. She lived her whole life, full life. So people would sometimes say, I offer my condolences. I said, well, my mother achieved victory. She heard the holy names, just chanting. Everything was pure Krishna consciousness at the time of leaving the body. I mean, God, everyone should want that for all their relatives. It's ecstatic. Of course, I miss her and everything, but it's amazing. So yeah, devotees should be a perfect gentleman. And, you know, I did give prasadam. In the beginning, I tried to give them things they couldn't relate to. That didn't go very well. Like you give a Westerner a glove juice, you know, oh my God, dripping. There's stories of Prabhupada giving people glove juice. But Prabhupada also liked cookies. I was with Prabhupada one time, and we took a whole bunch of cookies on a preaching engagement, just me, Prabhupada, and the driver or something like that. Went to a television show in Fort Worth, Texas, right near Dallas. And so I was there, and I got so like overwhelmed just being with Prabhupada that I forgot to offer the cookies to the people. And then I apologized to Prabhupada, I got cookies, and Prabhupada said, you know, give me some. And then Prabhupada must have eaten like 20 cookies. They were these special Prabhupada cookies, you know, they were just like sugar, flour, and, you know, whatever how we make it. But Prabhupada really likes sweets. Like, and he really loves sweets. And so, yeah, so Prabhupada had us give out cookies and things. And actually in the morning Prabhupada would give cookies. I would give glove-jubbins out to the kids. I remember sitting in Vyasa's, it's now sitting on this, we were watching Prabhupada on Vyasa's, and after class we had this kirtan, Prabhupada would give cookies out to all the little kids. It's nice, isn't it? It's very sweet. There was one lady who didn't have any kids. This is a funny story. This is Krishna Priya. She didn't have any kids. She wanted to get a cookie from Prabhupada. So she grabbed someone else's kid. Brought the kids and Prabhupada, and she got a cookie. So that's being real tricky to get Prabhupada's mercy. I was also tricky. I would sometimes take all of Prabhupada's remnants and not share it with anybody. I was so fanatic, like a very fanatic devotee, that I would even eat the grape stems and the seeds, and I would have eaten the plate, because it had it not been in metal. Anyway, and I would eat the dust from Prabhupada's feet when we go on morning walks. Dust in the sands, you know, just throw the sand in my mouth. So anyway, sorry to be fanatic like that. But not too crazy in front of non-devotees. Don't do that. Don't do that. I'll tell you one time I was crazy in front of my mother. I joined the movement, 1971, Prabhupada came. Prabhupada left, my mother was so freaked out, she came to the temple to see what I was doing. She spent the night in the temple. So next morning we're all sitting eating prasadam. And in those days, eating prasadam meant you sat on the floor, no plates, there's wax paper. You just tear off a piece of wax paper, put it on the floor. That was the American version of leaf banana leaves. So you know, wax paper, everything, well, whatever it was, just big mess on the floor. And so I spilled some water, not on the wax paper, and it was prasadam water. And I was so fanatic, this was after 3 days in the Hare Krishna movement, that I got down on my hands and knees and started to slurp it up all over the floor. Because I thought, you know, I don't want to, you know, desecrate this water, you know, it's offered to Krishna. And my mother's sitting there watching. And her son is just like, who she spent so much money to send to university and everything like that. Her son is on the floor. And so, you don't want to do that. That's crazy. In the beginning days, we were so crazy. Unbelievably crazy. Because we had no adults. Prabhupada was the only adult in the whole Hare Krishna movement. The rest of us, you know, 21, 22, 23. That was an old man. You were 23 years old. So, anyway, just be practical. And then Krishna consciousness can be spread widely if we're just normal, functional people, right? And devotees. You know, I chant, I get up early every morning, I do everything, you know, fuck up. But, you know, I'm a normal person and I'm dealing with people. Do I help? You know, and sometimes, you know, people are, I'm in, well, in a bus or something like that, people offer me a seat because I have gold. And I'll say, no, someone else should sit there and use it. So I don't think, oh, it's great they offered me, I'm a devotee, they're making spiritual progress. Yata Sukriti. I don't think like that. You know, I said, you know, let someone sit there who needs it. You know, even though I look old, you know, I have, somehow I got Krishna's grace, I have some energy. So, other questions? Yeah. Live new session.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. At one point you mentioned cultivating love,
Yeah.
and how do we make our heart ready for something like that, to cultivate this love that you spoke about?
Well, I think we see everybody. That's we started on the fruits of the outbound thing. Personally, we see everybody as our brother and sister. We get rid of what Prabhupada called skin disease. Skin disease means, you know, just thinking you are a particular family, you are a particular race, you are a particular country like that. And I just try to see everybody as my friends. You know, I try not to get into any sort of hierarchical situation that I'm better than you because I'm a devotee, or even I'm better than you because I'm an older devotee, I'm better than you because I'm a guru or something like that. I just try to see everyone on a friendly basis. And that's very satisfying, because when we try to be better than someone else, or think that we're better than someone else, that leads to hardness of heart. Like that. Yeah, we may know more verses than someone else. We may have more time in Hare Krishna, may be proud of disciple. But you know, whatever. We're all in here together trying to serve Krishna. And so I generally try to do away with hierarchy. You know, better, worse. And even when I'm dealing with someone who's not interested in Krishna consciousness, I try to think that they're really struggling. You know, I don't. Generally, I don't people think that people are demons. I don't put a label on people like that. I think that they've forgotten Krishna and they're acting improperly. You know, like Jesus Christ said, "Don't hate the sinner, hate the sin." So, and I don't like their activities, but I know that they're suffering because of their lack of Krishna consciousness. So, anyway, it takes some thought process, chanting, maturity in Krishna consciousness to come to that level. And it takes time. You know, whether I get angry with people, yeah, sure. You know, I'm driving a car and you cut me off, I'm gonna get angry with you. But I don't hate them. Actually, you know, there's one verse in the Upanishad says, one who sees Krishna in everyone's heart, yes, there's a running between that one and Pashati, Sarvakutesha, Chapanamata, He doesn't hate anyone, but he hates anything. So really, even as devotees who are supposed to avoid the envious, we shouldn't be hating people who are envious. But we stay away from them. So, you know, they're objects of compassion. You know, because people are suffering in this world. I mean, if someone is angry with me or envious of what I'm doing, it's their problem, it's not my problem. In other words, they're causing their own suffering. I shouldn't allow it to cause my suffering too. You know, sometimes someone says something to us, why should both of us suffer? You know, it's enough that they're suffering, and then we should recognize that. Anyway, a few little thoughts. I'm sure there's a lot more, but that's what comes to mind right now. Any other questions? Stop reading. No? Yeah.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. You've told us so many beautiful stories about Srila Prabhupada. Do you have a pastime with him that you been, that you would like to share with us? Another one?
I mean, they're all quite wonderful. I mean, nothing that's going to shock the doty off of you. But I mean, many things. I mean, one of the most, just as you asked that question, I was just thinking of being in Mayapur and circumambulating the deities there around Mayapur. That's before they had the big Radha deities. They're very small Radha deities at that point. Radha Krishna, no gopis there. And circumambulated, going around the altar with Prabhupada, and Prabhupada ringing the bell. There's videos of this. Prabhupada ringing the bell and all the devotees jumping up. Each time he got to one of the corners of the altar, he would, this big bell and pull the rope, and the devotees would just like jump up and down, go around with Prabhupada. Just memories like that. Nothing like Prabhupada saying that I was a rascal. I would have had a heart attack, because I definitely had healthy fear, and not so much fear, but reverence towards Prabhupada. So I basically had a lot of trouble opening my mouth in front of Prabhupada. I was young. Nowadays, it'd be different. I had more of a conversation with Prabhupada, but I definitely was afraid. It was very reverent. Prabhupada. There are many ecstatic, there's many stories. Like New Vrindavan in 1972, we had this Bhagavad Dharma discourses where Prabhupada was speaking for a whole week on the top of the hill in New Vrindavan. New Vrindavan at that time was all muddy. So they had to carry Prabhupada up in a palanquin. So it was his Vyas Puja day, which came after Janmashtami, obviously. And they gave Prabhupada some birthday cake, Vyas Puja cake. And then Prabhupada said, distribute it to everyone. Prabhupada, took a little bit. And then we had this fight with the devotees. The devotees were climbing on top of each other, punching, not the ladies, just punching each other out to get a piece of the cake. And Prabhupada was laughing the whole time. First Prabhupada was asked the question, but can we eat the cake in front of the deities? Because they had these big Jagannath deities there, and Radha Damodar. There's some pictures of this, not of the fight, but of the Vyas Puja there. There's actually some videos of that Vyas Puja. And so Prabhupada was just laughing to see us fighting for a remnant. Prabhupada had a real sense of humor. Prabhupada was, he was a normal person, but he was a person. It wasn't like a thing, Prabhupada was a person. And he had a sense of humor, and he had likes and dislikes. Prabhupada liked certain types of food. So, anyway, it was just very personal. It was wonderful. There's the times it was with Prabhupada. I wasn't one of his, most of his servants or anything like that, but I did have quite a few opportunities to be with Prabhupada. It was always just very enlightening to be going morning walks with Prabhupada. Morning walks. So Prabhupada would walk very fast, and then all of a sudden he'd stop, and people would sometimes run into him. It was amazing. It's just like stopping, like someone putting the brakes on all of a sudden in the road. And the devotees said no to do that. Sometimes people would step on Prabhupada's shoe or something like that. So, simple things like that. Just simple remembrances of Prabhupada. But basically, Prabhupada is present in his books, in his movement, his instructions, and people can be just as much in touch with him today. Now, that's another issue. There's a whole discussion about Ritvik stuff. Something may have about this before. But the most important connection we have in our sampradayas is a Siksha connection. Siksha means instructions, for those of you who don't know. So, people say, there's this whole Ritvik one that says you can be initiated by Prabhupada. But that's not, and then they say you could take shiksha from anyone. And I say the shiksha, and this is Prabhupada's instruction, Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur's instruction, that shiksha is much more important than diksha. Instruction. You know, generally the diksha guru also gives shiksha too. But at the same time, our connection with Prabhupada, everyone's connection with Prabhupada through shiksha is the most important connection that we can have. And, you know, diksha connection is important too, but the most important is the shiksha connection with Prabhupada, who's the founder of Charya, someone who set an example. And he started the movement, not just started the founder, but Acharya sets the example for the rest of us. You know, to me, that's it. I don't think anyone is bereft. Actually, Prabhupada said the grand disciple or the grand spiritual master gives more mercy than the actual spiritual master. So for those of you who are initiated later on, Prabhupada is giving mercy. I mean, yeah, you know, I also feel very connected with Sri Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati. I don't feel bereft because I wasn't initiated by Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur. I don't feel bereft because I wasn't there when Lord Chaitanya was there with the 6 Goswamis of Vrindavan. You know, I had just as much an opportunity to advance as any of the devotees who were with Lord Chaitanya. It's not I have less opportunities, I have just as much. But whether I take the opportunities or not is the question. It's up to me. Right? Should we get Heavy back now, or? Unless there's another quick question. Yes.
One more quick question. Hare Krishna. So I guess something I was wondering is like, upon initially like meeting Srila Prabhupada, you immediately like knew like, oh, I wanted to take shelter under
Yeah.
Srila Prabhupada. I guess like throughout the years, how did you maintain that I guess like that dedication to Srila Prabhupada and wanting to just constantly like surrender and stay under his shelter?
Eating a lot of prasad.
Yeah.
How do I maintain it? I don't know. I mean, I sort of recognized Prabhupada the first time I met him. You know, there's these, you know, I hesitate to say, you know, past life or something like that, but there was immediate, you know, deja vu, recognition of Prabhupada. It wasn't a challenge. It wasn't a challenge because, anyway, and then just reading more about Prabhupada. Oh, here's another thing, yeah. I'm trying to figure out how to answer your question. So even hearing more about Prabhupada, even after Prabhupada left, you know, reading the Limamrita and the biographies of Prabhupada. I think nowadays the devotees don't introduce people to Prabhupada enough. They introduce people to Prabhupada, you know, as the other Vyasa and everything like that. But one book that devotees don't distribute enough is the biography of Prabhupada. You know, it's one thing to distribute the Gita. You know, I like the Gita, obviously. But I also think of Prabhupada's life as Bhagavad Gita in action. You know, just like Arjuna was Bhagavad Gita. Arjuna's life is Bhagavad Gita in action too, but Arjuna is harder to relate to. You know, he was like over 5,000 years ago. And, you know, we're not in a battlefield. I'm not being asked to kill my cousins. And so, you know, what's happening there? But Prabhupada actually personifies Krishna's instructions in the Gita. And so, the more I heard about Prabhupada, read about Prabhupada, understood about Prabhupada, and that was continually, then the dedication increased at that point. And then Prabhupada really became my role model. Remember, I joined the movement when I was very young. So I was thinking, I want to be like that when I grow old. You know, so that was always what I was looking up to. And people function on the basis of role models. Isn't it? That's what I've seen. If we have a good role model in Krishna consciousness, then we're more likely to, someone who inspires us. And so parents are the original role models for children. And so the parents are like that, inspires, and then there may be other Vaishnavas. And I'm inspired by a lot of my godbrothers too. And And a lot of the devotees, not only God brothers, like I just mentioned, by Shekshik approval, it's inspiring for me. Increasing my devotion to Prabhupada. So not just Prabhupada, it's the Vaishnavas who have dedicated their lives. Look at my godbrother, Japataka Maharaj, who has all these health challenges, and he's still preaching. When I compare myself to him, I'm just like, oh my God. I would just go to Govardhan and say, goodbye, cruel world. But, he's still preaching, carrying out Prabhupada. So, there's very inspiring examples. Prabhupada's, of course, the primary inspiring example. But we have so many of them in our movement. There are people with trouble, too. Prabhupada said, don't be surprised with who goes, be surprised with who stays. So you look at, instead of the cup being half empty, you look at it half full. And sometimes people will talk about some people who had trouble in the movement and criticize the movement or criticize the sannyasi or gurus or whatever. But actually just look at, and I get a chance to associate with a lot of these great personalities, the GBC. And so a lot of the other sannyasis like that. And some of them are not godbrothers, they're disciples of godbrothers. And they're wonderful devotees. So many wonderful devotees, isn't it? India, anywhere. So many dedicated devotees. So that inspires me, and that keeps me going too. And there've always been challenges, not with Prabhupada, but sometimes there's been challenges in the movement too. Like when Prabhupada left, there were some disruptions, those are the Sabhavacharya days. But I always remain faithful to Prabhupada. I really consider going anywhere else. Yeah, not that everything was perfect. You can't expect everything in Iskcon to be perfect. It's not going to be. It's like Prabhupada said, a hospital where people are sick, but they're getting better. And Iskcon's like that. You're going to have all sorts of issues, problems, conflicts. But, we got Prabhupada's service. So it's relationship with Prabhupada and also the inspiration, as I said before, all these great devotees that I get a chance to associate with. And a lot of them are on the internet. And there's a lot of devotees that are very inspiring. We're doing a lot of preaching. I was just mentioning, there's one famous kirtan leader that, really inspiring. He's a disciple of one of my godbrothers. He was here at Sadhu Center, Radhika Das. And I listen to his kirtans, I get inspired. I start dancing, even my age. So, when I hear his kirtan. So, we get inspired by all these Vaishnavas, Isn't it? We've got so many good examples to get inspired by. Okay. Yeah. Okay, more questions.
Hare Krishna Gurudev.
Good to see you again.
How was your travel to Orlando?
How was the travel to Orlando? Well, I got on an airplane. Took care of a baby on the way here. Get the baby slow to his feet. So, no, it was fine. I'm just here for a few hours, just to see all of you and take care of some other things. It's been doing very good.
So I am still taking my baby steps in Krishna consciousness.
That's good.
So when I tell my friends or my colleagues that I don't eat onion garlic or I don't eat meat, and most of the friends I have are vegetarians, so they don't eat meat as well. And so what is the difference of the bhakti that they are doing? Because they say they go to temple, they do all the prayers in the morning, and
That's right.
so what is the main difference?
They go to the temple and do prayers in the morning, chant Hare Krishna. Wow. So you mean,
Not chant Hare Krishna. They're not into Iskcon, but the regular morning prayers they offer to all the deities in
all
the
the
house.
demigods. Yeah, because they're not recognizing that Krishna is Ahamadir Hidevam, he's the source of all the demigods. So, but there's benefit because they're recognizing someone greater than themselves. Actually, Prabhupada was talking about this in terms of some primitive cultures where they worship what, the sun or the moon or something like that. Prabhupada said this is a step up because they're recognizing, it's a step up. Just like in the Vedic literatures, if you go to the Rig Veda, Samaveda, Yajurveda, then you find so many injunctions about worshiping demigods. Indra in particular is there. But you also find Om Tad Vishnu Paramam Pada Santya Yatsuriya, that all the demigods look to Vishnu. So, and Krishna does say in the Gita, Virit Purvakam, it's not the right path. But still it's a step up. So we should appreciate they're taking that step up. Unless they're Mayavadis, unless they think, you can worship anything, Yatamat, Tatapad, and it's all the same. But we should appreciate, they have a sense of devotion. Krishna says in the Gita that when one desires to devote himself to a particular deity, he makes that person's faith strong. So step up. So, why not go to a higher step? Like Krishna says, Yoginam Abhisharvesham, all these different types of yoga. Vakatenam Thiram, Shadava, Vasuteno, Samayya Vitamam, whatever worships me is the highest. And they're doing things without proper understanding, but Krishna ultimately will bring them to Krishna consciousness, by Prabhupada and Krishna's mercy, they'll come to Krishna consciousness. So we should be compassionate. Like what I do, I deal with people who worship demigods a lot, especially in Fiji, which is actually Fiji, and anyway, so many people from India. They have all the gods on the altar. I just tell them that's fine. You just offer to Krishna, have him on a higher level, and the demigods, you just give them the remnants of what Krishna eats. Because that's what they want. Lord Shiva is Vaishnavanam Mitashambhu. In Bhubaneswara, which is actually one of the main locations where they worship Lord Shiva, they take the Jagannath, it's near Jagannath Puri, they take the Jagannath Prasadam and bring it to Bhubaneswara so Lord Shiva can take Mahaprasadam. So if you want to worship Lord Shiva, fine, give him Mahaprasadam. Please him in the best possible way. Ganesh is always keeping Krishna's lotus feet on his head. That's great. So continue if they want to continue. I remember in Fiji, it's another story from Fiji. Devotees used to go into someone's house and say, get rid of all these deities. And what did that would discourage people. So, step by step.
The main challenge comes during the lunchtime when I go to office.
Yeah.
The food that I eat and the food, we usually get, the colleagues and things usually get the takeouts, and so when I say the food that I eat is no onion garlic, how do I explain it when they say why?
Well, there's a scientific reason for it. And you can get into the modes of nature. But I usually go to the scientific reason that you can look it up on the internet that pilots and some airlines are not allowed to eat food with garlic before they fly a plane. Because it crosses the blood-brain barrier. Because you don't know what that means. And goes to the brain and causes a diminishing of the reflexes. So if someone's going to fly my plane, I want them to be fully awake. So, and because it dulls you. That's basically why. We could say mode of ignorance, but that people are not going to relate to that. I said it's something that dulls me. So therefore, I want to have a clear mind. And but, another thing, which I don't say, it smells bad. Because when I have to be close to someone who's eating garlic, I get sick. You know, I remember just the other day, someone gave me the temple room and they had been eating garlic. And it was after greeting the deities, I walked by and you know, so when you don't take it for some time, and plus there's substitutes. Aspertita is a very nice substitute for garlic. You know, sometimes I take bread and I put aspertita on it, and it tastes like garlic bread. I mean, it's a good taste. So there's ways, anyway, but you know, it's a specific problem with people from India is that garlic is a really big thing. Another big thing is tea. Tea. Because people, the British addicted people in India to tea. And this is interesting, they were the original drug dealers. They came to India and thought, we want to make money from the Indian people. Actually, the British Prabhupada said, or a mercantile country. Sorry if anyone's British here. So, what they did is they got a lot of tea, brought it from China. Tea is not originally from India, originally from China. And it has caffeine in it and other things that are addictive. So they gave it to people, they said, we want to do something for your health. So you all take this tea freely. Everybody drink tea for health. And you know, we distribute free tea stalls everywhere. And everyone was got high on tea, you know, caffeine. It wasn't like tea we have in the United States. This is heavy caffeine tea they have in India. I mean, sometimes if someone's driving a car, I'll make them drink tea in India. Because the drivers tend to fall asleep. So in that case, not devotee, but you know, professional driver. So then the British said, okay, now you got to buy it. And we'll tax it. So they started, you know, the famous thing, you know, the tea tax. Same thing happened in America too, you know. That's why there was this thing called the Boston Tea Party. Because the British, they were taxing the tea, and so the Americans went on a boat, and they dumped it all in Boston Harbor. So, you know, we get attached and addicted to different things, and sometimes they're not the best things for us. A lot of things people are attached to. People may be attached to eating too many sweets, you know, too. So it's an addiction. I would ask people, why are you so attached to it? Why are you so controlled by it? By garlic. Isn't it? It's just like, don't you want to be free? Why are you controlled by this substance? I want to be free. I want to be free and be controlled by some smelly little. Here's your boss, you know, some smelly little plants. Isn't it? I mean, and I also remember when I was young, my mother would cook onions, not garlic, and I'd be crying at the same time, you know, cutting the onions. Cut them in. Somehow it causes tears to come to your eyes. So I think it's probably time to go. Right? Mr. Prashad for everybody? Yes? Okay, thank you all very much. It's been a lively encounter. Is this on the internet or? Oh my God. You probably get kicked out of the art. Which page is it on?
Iskcon Orlando's YouTube
It's
channel.
not. Okay, just keep the links private. No. All right. So thank you very much. Hopefully we'll come back soon. Amen.
Maharaj. Everybody should please come to the sit beside. Hari, time. Nice group in the voting.
It is. Take it off the YouTube. Oh, or use your phone. Oh. You know what the iPhone's 16